And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at Pixie Queen from Game Brewer. Now, Pixie Queen, basically what's happened here is there's a mean, nasty queen who's in charge of the pixies, and she's a tyrant, and you are her subordinates, and you have these pixies who are essentially slaves, and you are trying to free them. You were just trying to serve this queen. This queen's going to smack you around and give you negative points, and so you need to, go beat that. I was like, all right, that's, it's a theme. This lady seems kind of mean on the front of here. But the board looked really cool. It was a worker placement game. Ooh, let's take a look. So the board starts with you having a bunch of fairies, the number of fairies depending on a number of players, chained up in a prison here. And you're trying to get points. The thing is, as the game progresses, each player is going to have a point track here. And if you notice, the positive points go up to 20, but the negative points go to 60. And in fact, if you get to 60, you're eliminated from the game. And as the game goes by, you're going to be constantly getting negative points as you lose points. You're going to be losing points down this track, and at the end of the game you need to get positive points to bring you out of that. Whoever has the highest amount of points, even if it's negative at the end of the game, is the winner. You're going to get points by making gold rings. So as you make gold rings, you'll take points here. The first person to make a gold ring gets 10 points, etc. You have points by getting your fairies all the way up and promoting them to work in the queen's household, and that also gives you 10 through 4 points. You get points for making offerings to the fairy Pixie Queen, and the first person to do that gets 4 points, and then that goes all the way up to 10. And there's a few other ways to get points throughout the game, but that's mostly it. You're also trying not to take negative points. There are different resources in the game. So you'll notice over here we have 3 different types of food. There is apples and honey pots and bread. And at any point in time, the queen might want one of these. There's also silver, gold, and stones. There's a bag that comes with the game in which players are going to be mining from that bag. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to put a certain amount of silver, gold, and stones, again, depending on the number of players. So this is a mined bag that you'll have. Now, players are going to, each turn of the game, be placing workers out. Each player has a shield, and this shield in front of them is going to be sitting kind of like this. So you have some tiles here. Players are going to have a special ability, like for example, this special ability gives me a free silver every turn. And so they'll have these different tiles that can be placed out here. It also shows you what the turn is, and this way you can keep your stuff hidden from everybody else. When it's your turn to place someone, you can place one person on a spot where there's one, but if there's 2, you need to place 2 there at any given point in time. And each place that you go to is going to be giving you various effects. For example, this one gives you 2 food of your choice, 2 silver. This lets you take a fairy and move them up 1 level. By the way, if there's ever a fairy on a spot, you only need the fairy goes in the hand spot. You only need 1 worker to go there, even if it's not your fairy's color. This one lets you trade goods. This one lets you turn silver into gold. The rate is determined by a track over here. So this board is kind of busy, so I want to show you, like here, you have there's different, one space lets you turn gold into a ring, and depending on where you are on this track will depend on how much gold it takes to turn it into a ring, and the space that lets you turn silver into gold. So this here, for example, 2 silver, it only takes for 1 gold. So this is an important track to be moving up on during this game. Other spots that are on the board, you can go get some tiles. Here you can get a food tile, and this is going to tell you how much free food you get at the beginning of every turn. You're basically stealing it. Here, at the end of every turn, there's an offering to the queen. You can make 2 different offerings. Here you can look in the bag before you mine in the bag. Here, when the queen's about to demote one of your pixies, you can. Here you roll a casino die, essentially, and you see what happens. You get some random resources on that die. Here you roll a whip die, and you split the points you roll between the other players. Here you can move up on these tracks. Here you change gold into rings. And there's just a lot of different space on the board. Up here you can switch your special ability with one of the ones that hasn't been taken yet, or switch a tile even with another player. You can go up here to move up in turn order. You have to pay a honey pot for each turn order you move up in. And there is a little bit of differentiation between the three types of food here. Honey pots are used at that one space to determine player order. When you go to your own spot here, where your mine is, you get to draw cubes from the bag equal to the number of fairies working in the mine. And so let's say I draw 3 cubes, I draw 3 silver. That's a fantastic thing. But if when I'm drawing cubes, if I draw any black cubes, or I got a gold, a silver, and a black, I can put the black cubes on someone else's fairy, chaining that fairy into that spot. And the only way to get rid of that is for them to pay bread. Bread gets rid of those chains. And then apples can be used to demote someone else's fairy to bring them down a level. So that's kind of what the 3 resources are used for. But they're also used because at the end of every round, you're going to be turning over a tile. And this is going to show the food the queen wants. So for example, in round 1 here, the queen would want honey pots. Round 2, the queen wants bread. She wants one of the foods. Everybody is going to pick a resource, one resource, hide it in their hands and hold it out. Your choices are the food the queen wants, silver, or gold. Now, someone has to give the queen the food they want. So when you reveal it, if no one does, the queen takes all the resources, and that's pretty much it. You're all in trouble. And if you give the wrong thing, you lose points, but I'm not sure why you would ever do that. If someone gives food though, let's say I give 3 honey pots, I can move my fairies up 3 spots as I move them up on the board from one level to the next. And I want to try to get them all the way up here to get points at the end of the game. If you give silver or gold and someone has given the correct food, then everyone who gives silver or gold will move 1 on these tracks, and whoever gives the most of silver or gold will move an additional 1 on that track, making those things easier. It's also important to move on that track because every round you're going to lose points based on where you are on a track. So blue is going to lose 2 and 3 points. He'll lose 5 points. You also lose points if you have fairies still in the dungeons. And that's going to happen every turn. And then that's it. You go to the next turn, changing turn order. If the little cubes here have changed, you'll change the big turn order. And that's at the end of the game. Whoever has the most positive points is the winner. The board itself is, it's a really cool looking board, right? It looks really neat, but it is kind of busy. For example, these spots here, there's one space in the board where you can steal from other players. And if their fairy is on this spot, then that's the amount of food you steal from them. Well, that's okay, right? But does it really matter? Do I go to a spot saying, oh, I wonder if someone will steal from me at this spot? And it just makes the board look even more cluttery. Not to mention you don't know what everything does. And I was I don't know, I felt the tiles. I think it's neat that the tiles at the top become part of the picture. That's nice. But they're really kind of bland looking, especially when you take them out of the picture. And so the artwork, really great artwork. And then when it comes down to the different tokens, we just basically have a pile. The fairies are okay, but when they're on the board, they're hard to see anything. The other stuff is just discs and stuff. And the game actually gave me stickers to put on them. I'm not sure if that comes. They weren't mentioned in the rule book, and I wasn't sure what they went on. I'm assuming the workers, but we put a couple on. They didn't look very good, so we pulled them off. I do like the other components here. I like the honey pots, although I kept thinking they were pumpkins. Apples and the bread, so those were some neat tokens. And then the gold, silver, whatever. The one thing I actually didn't like was the artwork, which seems odd, right? Because the artwork itself is really good looking. So let's take a look here. Okay, so that looks good, that guy. The problem is he looks almost the same as that guy, and that guy looks like they had some hair, and they changed it to female, and it feels like the selection screen on an RPG computer game. I didn't feel, and the shields, putting the tiles in front of them, I don't know, the artwork's fine, but it just looked all very, very samey. Except, for the characters. For the board, though, again, phenomenal. The whole thing has a very dark overtone to it, and when the colors get on the board, it can be a little confusing as to what is where. So I'm kind of mixed. I like some of the components a lot, and other ones, nah. All right, I don't like Pixie Queen, so I get that right out of the way. There's several reasons why. The theme's okay, little not sure I like the idea of these pixies being forced to be slaves, and I kept going in there whipping my slaves essentially and making them do things. But, I can, that's not that big of a deal. They are fairy tale creatures. The biggest problem I have with the game is it's negative. Now, Jeff Engelstein, who's on the Dice Tower, did a segment just this past year on our Gen Con show where he talked about this. And would you rather give yourself a point or make everyone else lose a point? It's the same thing, right? But in people's eyes, the positive thing is better. That's the way this game is. This game is you are constantly losing points. Every turn you lose points for the not being up on the gold track or silver track. You lose points for, how many fairies you still have in a dungeon during the game. You lose points. The queen will make you lose points. You lose points. You lose points. And if you lose enough points to the 60, you're eliminated. I haven't seen it happen yet. But the fact that it's there, it makes me unhappy. You shouldn't be eliminated for that. That's player elimination in a Euro game. Maybe it can happen, and maybe it's a joke. I don't know. But this whole getting negative points is really the same as getting positive points, right? And when I get a negative point, it's like everyone else got a point. So it's not really that big of a deal, but it feels negative. And so the whole game has this negative feel to it. Not to mention, then, there doesn't feel like there's a lot of optimal strategies for it. You have a couple strategies. Increase your gold-silver ratios, which you need to do anyway because you're losing points every turn if you don't, so that you can trade in gold to get a crown. Or go up there and there's an offering that was at the top of the board where there's like 4 different goods. You pay those, and every time you do, you add another good to that amount, which makes it harder for the next person. So you do that offering. Or run your fairies up and get them to freedom. Those are the 3 main ways to get points. There's minor ways to get points. Not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of, I'll spend this and just knock someone else down. There's a bit of a take that element to the game I'm not a fan of either. Like when you draw from the bag and you get black cubes, you're like, I'm just going to chain up your fairies. First of all, that's not that exciting for me. When I draw from the bag, get something bad, I'm like, well, I guess I'll hurt you. What? And then if someone just decides to chain you up and there's really no rhyme or reason to who they can do it to, then you got to waste bread getting rid of those, using apples to knock other people down, and then turn order. Now, the person who's last place picks their special ability first at the beginning of the game. That's fine. But to get from last place to first place, you need to get a lot of honey. So then you move up. It's really a pain to move up. And last place is bad in a worker placement game because you're the last choice. And so you have to waste resources to get to the front. And I found that most worker placement games I played have you go here, you move to the front of the line. And that works really well. You're wasting a worker to do it. But you get to go first next turn. Here you have to waste a worker and waste honey. And I did not like that at all. I did not like having to put 2 workers out, but if there's a pixie there, you only put out 1 worker. And as people are moving up, they don't get a benefit from me sharing the spot with their pixie. So now it's only 1 worker, and I made it easier for everybody else. And is there some deeper strategy to that? That coupled with the busy board. And you say, Vasel, it sounds like you didn't like anything about the game. Well, I do like the pulling cubes from the bag aspect. I think that's an interesting idea. I can just go and convert silver to gold myself, or I can dig into mines and hope I strike it. That was fine. I like the different tiles that have special abilities, even though you're going to have to look them up all the time. Some of the tiles that give you food every turn. That's kind of interesting, but I found in a worker placement game, when I play one, I want to be like, what should I do next? And this one is kind of like, I guess I'll do this. And since most of the spots on the board required 2 workers, I'll place them there. And then at the end, when you're offering to the queen, and somebody needs to give food, someone gives food to the queen. Well, it's not really that big of a fight there, because giving food to the queen lets you move your pixies up, which gives you fewer pixies on the board, but at the same time gives you a lot of points. So you're going to want to do that. And that whole blind bidding thing, blind bidding isn't something that people like a lot anyway. You're mixing that with this worker placement, which feels wonky. This game feels underdeveloped across the board for me. I don't know. The game ends at the end of, I think, 9 rounds or 7 rounds, or when all the best point tiles, there's like 5 that are in gold, are taken. And when it ended, each time I was like, good, let's go to the next thing. There was no excitement. There was no, I wonder what I'll do next time. In fact, the second time I played through this game, it was like I was like, what should I do differently? No, I'm pretty happy with what I did last time. And that worries me about a game if I'm not seeing alternate, really cool routes to strategy. But the biggest problem with the game easily is the negativity. I just don't get it. I don't like it, and I don't think a lot of other people will like it either, because people like to get positive results in games. It's like a psychological fact. And I know some people will be like, no, I don't mind that. That's true. And there are people who don't. But the vast majority will. And for that reason, and many others, I'm going to pass on Pixie Queen. Dice Tower judgment, not enough options, and too negative.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!